Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Inspiring Herstory. Before we get started with this episode, I will warn you of the possible triggers for some listeners. We discuss words such as rape, serial rapists, shootings, school shootings, as well as discussing self-defense. Please join me today for today's episode as I speak with Steve Kardian. Steve spent more than 30 years as a career law enforcement officer. He is a women's safety expert. In fact, he has taught over 200,000 women in self-defense programs. He's a self-defense expert and an author, among many other qualifications. Please join me in welcoming Steve Kardian. So welcome, Steve. Steve Kardian from Defend University. Why don't you introduce yourself, Steve?
Hi, Barbara. Thanks for having me. I'm Steve Kardian. I'm a lifetime law enforcement member and the director at Defend University. I have been teaching men, women, law enforcement, for 30, 35 years at least. And I have a very specific women's self-defense program that I've sort of focused my efforts on, moving forward, where, 15, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, I was still teaching law enforcement. I was still running a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy. And then I was doing my women's program. But we had a flood at our academy, and we ended up having to move out into a smaller place. And the way my partners, both, one was a lawyer. He became a partner in his law firm, and he had to go on, working a lot of nights. And then my son-in-law was my partner. My daughter was about to have our first grandchild. And then my wife had took ill. So I actually had a lease in hand. And then I got the gig with Simon & Schuster. They picked up my book. So I was like, I can't do both. So I decided not to open up the school. Focused on writing the book. Originally, the book I wanted it to be a general safety for all, but because my specialty has grown into the women's program, we dedicated it towards women and women's safety. Although the principles that are in the book apply to everyone.
Men, women, right.
Teens.
And I've bought 3 of those and given them out to people. So tell me, Steve, I'm very curious as to how you morphed into working so much with women. Why the passion behind that?
There's a number of reasons, and I don't know which was. Did you read the story in the book about me saving the kid on the beach?
I did. Yep.
8-year-old boy. Well, interestingly enough, when I was 17, my wife and I were 17. We were walking on a beach in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and we were going to go 20 minutes to Indiantown. And 5 minutes in, I had this overwhelming urge. I got to go back. Intuition is knowing something without knowing why. So I tell my girlfriend, I said, we got to go back. She goes, no, we're going to Indiantown. And I see the waves are like 10 inches high in the Long Island Sound. And so she decided to go back. Now, 5 minutes into that walk, I'm almost back to the beach house. And I see a lady jump out of her chair. A magazine goes flying. And she runs over to this pile of sand and screaming bloody murder. And I jog up there and I see 2 little feet sticking out of the sand. It was an 8-year-old boy that had dug a tunnel. The tunnel collapsed on him. So I took over for her. My girlfriend had gone into the house. Back then, you dialed the operator. And it was right on, the jurisdiction between Westbrook and Old Saybrook. So it took 5 minutes or so for them to get there. So anyway, I dig the little boy up, finally get to him. He was buried down so deep, I had to actually go around his head and his arms to get my hands underneath to pick him up. And I take him out of his grave, basically, and I hand him to his aunt. She shakes him, yells his name, and then she gives him back to me. And now I see that he's purple, blue. His eyes are rolled back in his eye. I thought his eyes were bleeding, but I now know it to be petechia. And he looked dead. And there were 20 adults all around, and I was begging, does anybody know mouth to mouth? Does anyone know CPR? Does anyone know mouth to mouth? Nobody would answer me. They just stared at me in shock. And I remember a guy, he looked like a young Tom Selleck, real beefy guy that you think might come to your aid if you needed help. And I'm holding this dead kid and I'm saying, sir, he's going to die. And he just looked at me, stared at me. So earlier in the summer, I had a pamphlet sent home from our recreation department. It was on CPR rescue breathing. And I read it vividly. And I read it a number of times. So that's another part that's in the book where I created a blueprint for a plan of action. If you think about something so vividly, your brain can act as if you've lived it. It creates a file. May not be perfect, but it creates a file. In law enforcement, we call it visualization. A military calls it emergency conditioning. So that was the blueprint. So I laid him down, pinched his nose, began breathing for him, and I breathed life into him for about 5 to 6 minutes. That's how long it took the police to get there. And when I heard the sirens then pulling up, after that 5-minute period, he started breathing on his own. And I had to answer a million questions from the trooper and the ambulance corps guy. And, then you leave, you go about your day. An hour later, there's a knock at the beach house, and it's the trooper and the ambulance corps guy. And I'm like, oh, this can't be good. This can't be good. So, they come to the door and they said, can we talk to you? And then they took me outside and they said, just want to shake your hand. The doctor said, if you hadn't done what you did when you did it, he would be dead, or worse, he'd have been a vegetable. So, I tried looking. There's a little story to this. I tried looking for this kid for 40 years. Couldn't find him anywhere. And I'll back up. I tell that story for 3 reasons. Number one, my first experience with intuition, first experience with creating a blueprint for a plan of action, and number 3, you can never rely on anybody to come to your aid. Right. So, 40 years later, I'd been searching for him. After I became a police officer, I'd been, like when the computer age came about in the late 90s, I was searching for him. Couldn't find him. All these years, couldn't find him. Right before I wrote him into the book, and right before I finished the book, I had a private investigator search for him. She goes, I believe I found him in Pennsylvania, but they completely blew me off. So I said, wasn't meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be. So a week later, 2 weeks later, I'm in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm teaching a class in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I tell that story to the students for those 3 reasons I mentioned. To the instructors, I was teaching the Las Cruces, the Mexico State University Police Department. And I told them for those 3 reasons, this is why I mentioned this. And then I said, you know what? I'm still looking for this kid, Greg Brainard. Lady in the room goes, I know a Gregory Brainard. I'm like, where does he live? She goes, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I always envisioned that he had been somewhere at the shore because his parents were out sailing. His aunt was watching him, and he nearly died. So I'm like, I'm not feeling it. But she says, yeah, I know him. He has some really important job he never talks about. We all go to church together. I said, well, call up the wife, contact her, see if you can get a hold of him. If it's him, if he lived in Pennsylvania, vacation in Old Saybrook, he's the guy. Well, at the end of the day, she gets a call from the wife. It's the guy. He didn't know anything about me, didn't know anything about the 20 people, didn't know anything about anything. His family had told him that his uncle saved him from drowning, and they had such a deep guilt about what had happened. So he didn't know. He knew he nearly died. And I said, triggers, whatnot. I said, we can't talk now. The little girl in the class was crying. The female police officer that was, helping close up, she was crying. They're crying on the other end. I said, no. So a week later, he calls me, and I'm in Florida on vacation. I just finished the edits, and he had grown up as an 8 and 9-year-old. He couldn't relate to other kids his age because he saw them doing things that almost got him killed, and he had gone through high school, kind of an introvert. Went to UPenn. Got a degree in engineering, then went to George Washington University, got an advanced degree in engineering, and he went to work. It was either the FBI or the DOD. He went to the work for the DOD, and he had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working underneath him. And when we spoke, I told him the story I just told you. And I said, well, what do you remember? He goes, like it was yesterday. And he's an 8-year-old kid. He goes, I was digging. He said, I was digging like this. I was digging. He said, I got in too far. I knew I shouldn't have been doing it. And eventually it collapsed. But when it collapsed, my hands were in front of my face, and my face fell on my hands right into the sand. He thought that he had about a 5-minute breathing window. That's how long it took me to get back. So he says, I could hear the people. I could hear the seagulls. I could hear the waves, he said, but there was so much pressure on me. I couldn't I couldn't yell, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do anything. He says eventually he had taken in a breath, and he was trying to kick his feet. He could feel the breeze on his feet to get his aunt's attention, and it collapsed on him further. And he said, I wasn't able to take in air anymore. And he said, I passed out. I went unconscious. I said, wow, you couldn't have been any closer to death. And just like this, and this is a brilliant man. He's a brilliant guy. He goes, no. He said, I was dead. He said, I was outside my body. I didn't see God. I didn't see the bright lights, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was warm. And he said there came a time when he knew he had to return back into his body. And next thing, he woke up and he was in the emergency room being worked on by the doctors. He said he just wanted to get the sand and everything out. And so anyway, Inside Edition finds out about it, and they fly the guy in, and they reunite us on the beach in Old Saybrook. And what I just mentioned, the religious component. The guy's he's brilliant. The reason I couldn't find him was because basically when Inside Edition sat him down to talk to him, they said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "My job doesn't exist." And they're like, "What do you mean?" He said, "You'll never find my job listed or described anywhere in this world." And they said, "Well, what would you be?" And he said, "Well, I'd be considered a fixer." So I still don't know what it means. I know some of the work that he did, the high level work, and all the people that were working underneath him. And basically, he said the man upstairs had a different path for us to go. So that's one of the reasons, and possibly. The other, I was sexually abused by a priest when I was in 8th grade. And, that left a lasting impression, certainly not a victim like, or a survivor like people that have really endured terrible things. But, I got the feel of what it's like to be, taken advantage of when you're compromised. I was in a hospital with a broken back and I couldn't move.
I remember this story. You told this story at the class.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was sexually abused by him. And the ironic thing, my best friend had come up. He jumped on the bed. And I said, "Sal, you're not going to believe this." I said, "This priest just touched me, in my privates." And my parents came in and we told them. And they got the hospital administrators there. And the police came in. And, here I am. A week earlier, I had broken my back. And the doctors are talking to me. And the doctor goes, "Stephen, could this have been a dream?" And, back in the 70s, priests were God. Yeah. Literally, they were God. That's how highly they were held in the Catholic Church. And then the cop goes, "Hey, doc, was he on any medication?" And the doctor looks up and he goes, "No, he was when he came in, but he's not on anything now." So basically, when he asked me, "Stephen," I'm sorry, it was after the police officer made that mention. It was after that he asked me if this could have been a dream. And my parents were like, "That's done. Over. No more." And, so I got to feel, what it was like to not be believed. And
to be completely discredited.
Yeah. So the third one was when I was a young detective. And one of my first big cases that went to Superior Court in Westchester County was a rape case. And it was a rape case in which a woman pulled over on the side of the road. She had found out she had breast cancer. And she was in like this little turnaround thing with some houses in it. And these two people in a Bronco drove up to her. They told her, "We're cops. Get in the car." They threw her in the back of the Bronco. One guy stayed with her. And they took her to several locations. And they took her pants off, her underwear, and they were trying to sodomize her and sexually assault her. And, they partially accomplished, but she was able to fight them off. And every time she would scream and fight them off, lights would come on and they would go elsewhere. And one of the last places that she ended up was on the front lawn of Vanessa Williams, the former Miss America and star in Chappaqua. So it went between Newcastle, where the Clintons lived, Chappaqua, and into Mount Pleasant, which was the jurisdiction I worked with. So anyway, we got them to confess, and it went to trial. And one of the kids' parents was affiliated with, we'll say, the mob. And he hired this guy named Vincent Lana, who was a big, well-known two-star general, a lawyer for a long time, and he had this reputation that, he was a pit bull. And, I had met the victim, the survivor, that day in court, and she was like a different person. And that was the first time I worked with a sane nurse as well, Karen Coleman. She did the case, and sane nurses were very early, way back. And Karen Coleman and I actually became friends, and I ended up serving on the advisory board for Westchester County for victims assistance, where they provide, and I used them a lot over the years. And so the woman that had been attacked was doing well. The cancer was being treated, and she was doing really well. And she looked like a different person. So I'm in the courtroom, and Vincent Lana looked like a Kojak wearing a $3,000 suit. And the other kid had an attorney as well that was very noteworthy. But Lana comes up to me. I'm taking the stand. I was on the stand for about 2 days. And Lana comes up to me and he goes, "Good morning, detective." He goes, "My name is Vincent Lana. How are you doing today?" And I was like, man, it's going to be a long couple days. And it was. Excuse me. But we won the case. The one kid got 10 to 12 years. And the other kid got, who she described as a gentleman compared to the first one, he got 6 to 8 years. And, that and a lot of the sexual assaults and child abuse and, that seemed to, have a lasting effect and memory on me. So I guess it's a combination of a lot of things. And because I became more in demand and, all of a sudden 20 years ago, they had this case. It was a Carly Bruscia case, young 11-year-old girl walking behind a gas station. If you saw the video, you'd never forget the guy grabbing her by the hand and walking her across the parking lot. And he later raped and killed her. And so one of my instructors that teaches my program was a school teacher and a child safety expert. And he said, "Would you come down? I'd want to show some moves." He said, I'd rather have you there and, walk me through it. And so my department let me go down in uniform, and we went down and we did the segment. It went really well. And soon after, the senior investigator of the investigative unit, Bob Reed, great guy, and another investigative reporter, Cindy Galley, she now works for ABC, and they call upon me sometimes when they need. And they said, "We want to do something with you." And that had been one of the first things that we did. Was we went onto a college campus, and never been done in the country before. That's why they were so interested in doing it. And my job was to try and lure myself into the girls that were leaving campus. I had, a backpack. I had a Boston Red Sox thing. I had sunglasses that had cameras in it. I was wired up for sound. And Inside Edition was like hidden in the woods, videotaping, hidden in the brush, videotaping. So I stopped 8 women. And to my disbelief, all 8 women let me in the car and drove off with me in less than 30 seconds. And ever since then, I became their safety expert, became their law enforcement expert, and done 1,500 segments with CNN, HLN, Fox News, Fox and Friends, Fox and Friends First, America's Newsroom. I recently, Dr. Phil flew me out for the 6th or 7th time to talk on the young girl that was killed in Utah. Yes. They were both from Florida.
I can't remember their names.
Just drawing a blank on her name. Yeah, it'll come to me. But he flew me out. Regular on the Dr. Oz show, talking about a variety of things, mostly crime and safety related, home invasions, ride shares. And, so I became that guy. And after the book was written, I said, no more law enforcement. I want to focus just on the women's safety. And, but that didn't happen. They kept calling me for law enforcement stuff. So what I did was I started traveling all over the country, and people were coming to me from Spain, Ireland, England, Malaysia. I had the men's and women's kickboxing coach come from Kenya. I had a survivor of the Westgate Mall attack come from Kenya. And the military started bringing me out to San Diego to the Miramar Air Base to teach their readiness and deployment. And then the Marine Corps Depot, Recruit Depot, began bringing me out. And then the Nellis and Creech Air Force Base brought me out. And all sorts of law enforcement agencies began coming to me. So it became, my passion to empower these people. And that's mostly what I do. I still teach some of the high schools. I teach at Hewitt and Trinity, which are two of the oldest schools in New York City. And I think Hewitt is the second oldest still active running school in the country. The high end, the tuition those kids pay is equivalent to a good college. And I do the ones I've been doing for 15 years or so, where I've made instructors. They've gone, like phys ed teachers. Created them as instructors. They go back and they teach. And they would bring me in then to do a 3-hour program, typically for the seniors going off to college. They're students in transition. And like Bronxville High School, it's a wealthy area in Westchester County. And they have a senior week, and they provide them with all sorts of things that are meant to prepare them going forward in freshman year. And our program for the last 15 years has been rated #1 by both the boys and the girls. So for the girls, we teach them sexual assault prevention. And I show a lot of my videos. I mean, if I only have an hour or two with the women, I want to empower them with knowledge and information that's going to keep them safe. Self-defense, great program we have, but self-defense in almost every aspect is always the last resort. So it's easier, as they say, to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble.
Right. Was that the Jane Jiu-Jitsu program?
It originally was the Fight Like a Girl program. It was originally the Rape Escape program, then the Fight Like a Girl program. Then it was Girls on Guard. I think maybe when you went to it was called Girls on Guard. And then my partner...
I have the shirt. It says Jane I can never say that. Jane Jiu-Jitsu. It has an instructor.
It must have been fairly recent, within the last 3 to 5 years.
I would say 5 years-ish, right around there. Yeah, I still have the shirt.
Yeah, because I had a partner who went through he was out in Arizona, and he went through a really difficult divorce, and he just wasn't around, wasn't doing anything. I was doing everything. And my mentors told me, with the book and with the liability, that I have to do my own thing. You've got to start your own thing. So I created the Jane Jitsu program. I ended up trademarking Defend University, and Defend University is mainly all things that come under it, which would have been my law enforcement program, safety and security for the general public, and the women's program. But I've gravitated into that. That is what the calling has been for me, and that's where the work has been for me. I would love to open up another school, but I already had 2 hip replacements and a shoulder replacement. Lifelong martial artist, and actually the shoulder was from a high school wrestling injury. So going with with 300-pound young 20-year-old cops, it's going to be rough, and
it hurts.
Yeah, I was on the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Hoist Gracie changed the world, the martial arts in the world, the way we used to see it. It completely changed. So I was flying out to California every other month for a week at a time, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, bringing Hoist and Horion and Elio of the Gracie, they're very famous in Brazil. They're very famous here. And everybody in the world now is doing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So I learned from the very best. I brought in the very best. I went to take seminars from the very best until I became one of those people, and a go-to person for law enforcement and safety, primarily women's safety, because that's where my expertise sort of went to when I stopped running the Jiu-Jitsu Academy. After I retired in 2007, I actually got a waiver from the state of New York to go work with the New York City Department of Investigation as a chief investigator doing bribery, fraud, corruption, organized crime. I did the last 6 months of the Gambino crime family investigation, which was really interesting with the feds. Then I got picked up by Campus Speak, at the time the #1 rated campus speaking agency in the country. So I traveled all over the country teaching about sexual assault prevention, dating, violence, spring break issues, all crimes against the women, basically. And then I did that for 5 years. Then my wife took ill, and I ended up going back to work for the U.S. Marshals for 3 years as a contractor, doing basically everything the Marshals do except going out on warrants. And then I started doing the women's program and lecturing on safety pretty much full time until COVID hit. So that's become, my passion. I just enjoy sharing knowledge and, teaching others so that they can take back what I know or some of what I know, because, the people that come back for a second visit, they look at the program completely different. And I did some videotapes that need to be edited. With COVID, we just haven't gotten it done yet. And that's pretty much the story. I mean, I really enjoy doing what I do. I have a great assistant, Carol Ann Williams, that you know of.
I'm hoping to have her as a guest. We're playing phone tag right now.
I'm sure she'll get. She was away too.
Right, I know. Yep.
But she started just coming to every seminar I did, and eventually, because she knew my program, I started bringing her in, and then I eventually started paying her as an assistant. And she travels all over the country with me. And like I said, this past weekend was the first weekend that we didn't work together, and God, as long as I can remember.
And I think you put on Facebook that you missed her.
Yeah. It's been like 12 years we've been doing, and I have others that assist me, but we're in sync. She knows exactly what I'm thinking, what I'm going to do, how it's going to respond. In other words, when she's there, things go much, much smoother.
Right.
Than with, like, if I went for the first 10 years I was teaching, I'd say the program, I was doing it alone. I would go in and, you probably saw how I show you how I select a girl to be an assistant. And that's what I was doing. But then she came along, and she has a job that's flexible enough that, if we plan something in advance, like we're doing the Pratt Institute again next month, and she'll be able to be there. And I was going to do July, but I'm going to wait until the fall and start up again with the teaching seminars and perhaps traveling. I think people are still a little skittish.
They are, and the numbers, I guess, are going up and down.
The numbers are going up. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, have you ever had someone come back or contact you in some way and say, if it weren't for what you taught me, I would not have been able to get out of the situation that I found myself in? Can you tell me, without obviously details that are personal, can you tell me anything about a story like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even in the book, there's one story of a young girl went off to college and she got attacked. And she was able to fight the guy off. And women being grabbed in the subway, being accosted on the street. There's dozens of women that have contacted me about success with what they've done. And I have mothers that I've, taught locally in Westchester County, and they're like, I still tell my daughter, blah, 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 blah. And so, it's been a very successful program. You can't measure because of what I've taught them safety-wise, because they went to the left instead of going to the right when they had that creepy feeling about a person, which is all talked about in the book. So that's immeasurable. But physically, I would say probably close to 20 women that had been involved in something, typically and most often with a boyfriend or a significant other or an acquaintance, that they were able to get out of it, able to thwart it, and or using some of the things that we talk about in the book, where a woman's being watched, or there's a target glance. They're looking at something that is of value, and a woman could be followed home, or she could be accosted out in the parking lot.
Right.
So there's been good success, but I think the most important is the information that I share and the stuff that I share in the book, and it's of great value to women because.
Oh, I agree. I've given them as gifts. I highly recommend this book. In fact, it was on my website for a little while, but I think I had to switch carriers, or not carriers, but your platform, and that whole page went away. So the name of the book is The New Superpower for Women. When did you write that, Steve?
It came out 2017, and not long ago, I had a meeting with my agent, and it's time to decide if I was going to write another book. I don't think I'm going to do another book. I mean, I'd like to, but it would be a year and a half to two. It would be a 2-year process from doing the, you write up like a 40, 50 page production on what the book is going to be about. And that goes out. You know, I was before the big five, the big five publishers in the country and in the world. I didn't even know their names, you know, Penguin and Simon. There were two entities of Simon and Schuster that wanted me, but they couldn't fight for me. So they had to, amongst themselves, decide who was going to actually make the offer. And they made me, you know, an offer, which was a really good advance. Audible gave me a very good offer, and before the book was even started, just based on our what we wrote up about what the book was. There's a name for it. Again, I'm just drawing a blank because it's been so, yeah. And
yeah, I have the ebook. I have it downloaded on my phone, so that every now and again, it's good to just remind yourself of being so cautious.
Absolutely.
You know, just being aware. I when I was teaching classes, like I said, when I was done with your class, I was so gung ho because I finally had the skills behind. I always talked to girls and women my whole life, and people who know me know this, that about safety and awareness, and simply being, instead of being on your phone, being aware of where you are and your surroundings. And that doesn't mean being paranoid. There's people out there that have a false idea of what you mean by being aware. You know, you can be aware and trust your gut. We've been taught from a very young age that your thoughts and your feelings, don't be rude, don't be mean, don't be, you know, whatever. And the reality is that you're going back to your intuition, when it's a real thing. And you know, they say, I don't know, scientific studies say that women have a better sense of that because we're more feely, I guess. But we do get an idea, and, you know, your elevator goes to close and someone wants to come in and you're like, oh no, you know, and it can be construed as a racial or whatever in the other person's mind or in the general vicinity. But the reality is that if you're not comfortable, you're not comfortable, and you do not have to keep yourself in a situation that you're not comfortable in. And that goes a long way as far as avoiding a potential. And,
right.
You know, you may be way off, but why chance that? Why worry about being rude? I have no issues with being rude. Like, that's not I don't care.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who do. And
yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, I've taught my girls, you know, you walking down the street and be aware. And you see someone who makes you uncomfortable, make sure you're on the other side of the road. And if you have to cross the road, you don't have to look at them, flip them off or something, or make it obvious. You can simply cross the road. There is there's, you know, and we need to teach women and girls that it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable. I don't know why. I don't have to have a reason why. I'm just not comfortable, and I'm going to move away. And so, you know, a lot of people perceive that as rude, and it's not. It's self. How do you say it?
Self-preservation.
That's the word. Yes. Self-preservation. Yeah. It's really taking care of yourself, because they're, like you said, again, falling back, you can't rely on other people to take care of you, because nowadays when something happens, everybody whips out their phone.
Yep.
They're not there to help you. They're there to record it in case they can post it on their feeds, and, you know, no one's there to help you. So you have to try and avoid it in the first place.
Absolutely. And what the advice I give to moms, in other words, if I do a woman's program, and say it's a group going off to college, private group, we'll say, I invite the moms to come, at least for the safety presentation, because as an adult female, you have so much more knowledge, and you can reinforce what it is that I'm talking about. The intuitive gift, the intuition, it gets better with life experience. And if you haven't experienced, say, a particular thing, then that's where the blueprint comes in. If you're exposed to, like, someone attacking you, you're something that's never happened to you, somebody's trying to break into your home. If you've never thought about what I would do in that situation, your heart rate goes up 114 beats a minute. You lose your fine motor skills. using a key to open up your car or your dorm or your house, upwards towards 145, we see that they lose their complex motor skills, which is what typical like karate programs would teach. And then between 145, 175, your gross motor skills, which is what we rely on in our program, they thrive. And when you go up above 175, 200, you go into the frozen zone. That's where you see an active shooting or a robbery or some sort of a blitz that you don't see coming. That's where people freeze. They just don't know. It's overload. They don't know what to do, and they go into the frozen zone. So by empowering yourself with knowledge, by thinking about something bad happens in your community, something bad happens in the news, in the media, think about, wow, what would I have done in that situation? And just for a minute or two, think about it and think, what would I do? And think about it vividly, and you'll have that file in which to go to. And it might not be perfect, but it's going to allow you to control your adrenal response. And you'll, like I see from the first time, I think it was my first week or two in Ridgefield, Connecticut, and there was a police officer on the New York border who called out with chanting in the woods. Believe it or not, they were devil worshippers, and they attacked him, and he was beaten up pretty badly. And I'm going lights and siren, and I'm like, it was with Sergeant, and my heart's coming up in my throat. I'm having trouble breathing. Yeah. And fast forward, 10 years later, you're going to a serious call. You're, finishing up your coffee or, eating your lunch, going lights and sirens, and your heart rate. And, even if shots fired, my voice stays just like it is now. It doesn't, you go through so much that you become conditioned to that level of, violence or whatever the call might be, that you're able to maintain your composure. Because I was a sergeant for 20 years here, and I retired out of here from the PD. And if you get nervous, your people get nervous. So you maintain control, they maintain a calmer statute.
So, what would you advise to women, just off the cuff, things that they can do besides, walking out of a building and scanning the parking lot, holding their keys in their hand instead of having to dig for them in their purse at the car? What would you give them? What would you give our listeners for kind of a quick, this is what you should do almost every day, make it a habit?
Yeah. Anytime you're out and about, you should be in like the condition yellow, where your heart rate is normal, but especially if you're around strangers, you want to be paying attention. You don't want to be on your phone. You take away your auditory sense. You don't want to be texting. You take away your visual sense. In the book, you see your auditory can be 25 to 100% better than your visual. How many times people get it wrong. But, just constantly scanning, looking for anomalies, things that just that look out of place. Also, like you mentioned, walk into a building, just do this. Note where the exits are in a mall, even in a store. I spoke on the shooting up in Buffalo last week, was it? Last week or a week and a half ago? And, the same things, believe your eyes and ears, get moving. The 4 people that were shot in front of the store, they were basically ambushed. It would have been really hard to react to the gunman. But the people in the store, they had a chance. But what he did, either intentionally or accidentally, he fired like 6 rounds into the store. So people hit the deck. I don't know if he was told to coach to do that. He was coached. Believe me, he was coached, and he practiced. But when he went into the store, you got to believe your eyes and ears. You can't go, wow, what it sounded like gunfire. You started going in the other direction. And in today's day and age, I mean, it's still, and the active shooter that we had the other day, horrific in schools. I've talked on so many of those cases from Newtown, and there needs to be a better way. There needs to be a better way,
and that should have been our chant at the very first one.
Yeah,
not all these consecutive ones.
I don't think that there's a case that I've talked on that there wasn't. There always is a mental illness component, and somebody somewhere within that person's life community, they know that he's capable, and they know that there is likely a plan in place that he is capable, and he will be doing this.
Yeah. There's somebody out there who's not surprised.
Yeah, I did a whole thing with, I don't know, hundreds of school teachers, and there were two active police officers that were youth officers or officers that remain in the school, and they use this app called Bark, and it looks for keywords for suicidal students, for perhaps somebody that's communicating or talking about being an active shooter, and they look for those things. And it's a program that the schools can opt into. And it's going to be things like that are going to help. Social media, you go on Facebook and you write something that somebody complains about, or they pick up a key word. They should be able to pick up words that are going to be lead to violence, if you will. And they're not doing it. They're just not doing it.
Is it the acronym BARK, like dog bark?
Yep.
Or is
yes.
Okay.
Bark.
Okay. I'm going to look into that. So if you had any advice, I always ask this of all my guests, if you had any advice for men and women, as far as personal safety and awareness, what would that be, Steve?
Certainly the basics, be aware of your surroundings, don't be on your phone, pay attention. If you see something, start to react immediately, carry pepper spray. I like the pepper spray that it actually wraps around your hand. It's a point to point. So if you arrive at a shopping center, when you walk from your car into the store, it's got to be in your hand. For most people, it's at the bottom of their backpack, their purse, whatever. If you lower your guard low enough, it doesn't matter if it's New York City, Chicago, LA, or the smallest suburb in Timbuktu, Tennessee. There's going to be somebody that's looking to take advantage of that.
Right. And I maybe I'm just weird, but I always read about things like that and the psychology of criminals who have been willing to talk about how they chose their victims.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of it is how you stand. A lot of it's how you walk. And, they had this, I wish I could remember the experiment that they did. But they showed a movie. They showed clips of people walking in downtown New York City, and the criminals could pick out who they would choose as a victim simply by the way they walked, the way they held their head, the way they held their shoulders, the way their arms swung. It's such a science, but it comes so easily to them, and we don't give it a thought. I walk out, I do make eye contact, but a lot of people don't. They're either on their phones, like you said, they're not aware.
Yeah.
But there is things that even if the person who has bad intentions, they aren't in their head actively saying, well, their head is low and their shoulders are hunched. And it's an innate thing that they have looked for or noticed that this type of person's not going to fight back. Because one of the first rules that they teach you in self-defense is a person will only come at you if your body language says that I'm going to be an easy target, and they don't think they're going to get hurt. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get caught. Isn't that what you taught me?
And it's they choose a potential target in 7 seconds or less, and it's in the book.
7 seconds.
And
yeah. It is in the book. Yes,
the Grayson Stein study, and we created body language images to show you what they were looking at when they saw someone.
That's what I'm referring to. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So see, I did read your book.
Yeah, there you go.
So, I did. Yeah, so that's where I learned it.
Because of what I do, I'm constantly doing research. And as a matter of fact, I'm drawing a blank on his name. It was on ID Discovery, and they were doing a piece about this serial killer, and they have him on video confessing and then talking about. He used the word I forget. He used a word that basically that the girls are. He used a word that's not nice, but basically meaning that they're unaware. And they're not experienced enough. And he said, if they just lock their doors, they leave their house door open, but they don't close their door. If they just listen to the things that their parents had told them, that would have stopped me from killing them, or sexually assault. He was a serial rapist, if you will, and he was also convicted of attempted murder. And he said, if they just paid attention to the basics, and shame on those fathers that and parents that didn't prepare their daughters for going on, because he went after college girls almost exclusively, and I think he got 330 years in Colorado, in I think it was Iowa. He traveled, and he went out to college campuses, and he had and he like a food truck, if you will, something similar, and that's how he got into the campus. So he was on the road a lot, and he would find his targets.
Well, Steve, I'm gonna wrap it up. I want to remind our listeners that the book that we're referring to constantly throughout this show is The New Superpower for Women. And I, along with Steve and many, many other people, really strongly encourage you to listen to it or read it, give it to your friends, because it's a very important book and it teaches a lot of information, things that if you're not conscious of body awareness, this might give you that aha moment. Wouldn't you agree, Steve?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
So, Steve Kardian, I appreciate your time and thank you very much for hanging out with me for about an hour.